Oftentimes, the biggest hurdle preventing someone from becoming a house flipper is a general feeling of, how do I get started? The purpose of today's video is to give you not only the knowledge, but the confidence to be able to go out and take action. We are going to review my first time house flip. We'll go over acquisition strategies, how we're going to finance not only the purchase, but the renovation. Then we're going to be talking about managing the construction project before strategies on how we're going to maximize profit when it comes to sell the property. My name is Stephen Lutman with SJ Lincoln Realty. Let's get started. For anyone that happens to be new to the channel, a quick backstory on myself. My name is Stephen Lutman. I'm a graduate of the University at Albany's MBA program. Prior in my career, I've had stints at a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. I've worked in banking, both on the retail as well as back office, doing commercial debt restructures. And I've also been a portfolio manager for a local real estate investment firm here in Albany. However, what's going to pertain most to today's video is I am a real estate broker with SJ Lincoln Realty. I've been a multifamily apartment building owner for the better part of 15 years. And as of the completion of this project, can now call myself a house flipper. Once you make the decision that house flipping is for you, the number one problem you have to solve for is, where am I going to find these opportunities? Where are these houses going to come from? And the number one place I'm going to send you is networking events. I don't care if you are brand new to real estate or a 30-year veteran, attending local networking events is mandatory. And this could be something as simple as you walk up, introduce yourself to people. Hi, my name is Steve. I'm looking to flip a house. It's possible you might find someone that's looking to sell an asset. What's more than likely is you'll find contractors, attorneys, lenders, all of the people you're going to need to bring together at some point to complete your puzzle. You are going to find them at networking events. And we're going to find these groups by Facebook. Instagram's a great place. A lot of the local groups have social media footprints. You can find them that way. Google searches are also helpful. You could look on, I'm a big fan of Bigger Pockets. A lot of them will have advertising on Bigger Pockets for meetups. The biggest meetups in your area are going to be the RIAs, which is your Real Estate Investors Association. So that's a national group that has local meetups. That's a great place to look. But for your cities, Facebook, Google is going to be a great place to look. Next place is going to be, we'll call it wholesalers/real estate agents. For those who are not familiar with wholesalers, these people operate a business where they connect with sellers of houses that need to sell and pair them with investors that are looking to buy, ideally for quick transactions. So these are generally going to be people that own property that don't necessarily want a full standard multiple listing service. The properties are either in distress or maybe they financially are in distress, but for whatever reason, they need a quick sale. They connect with wholesalers. Wholesalers match the two together. The wholesalers get paid because they might agree to purchase the property for $80,000. They're going to sell it to you for $100,000. The wholesaler keeps the spread. The seller sells their property quickly, and you get the asset that you're looking to invest in. So you can connect with local wholesalers. I say /real estate agents because it's possible some of the real estate agents in your area might have off-market opportunities that you could reach out to. But these are going to be kind of, you're not going to see them listed online. They're going to be more private. So networking events is a great place where you're going to run into these wholesalers, but also don't forget that real estate agents may have off-market opportunities as well. Next avenue is foreclosure auctions. This could be a bank foreclosure or a tax foreclosure. This is going to be very much jumping into the deep end of the pool. This is going to be more for sophisticated investing. The gamble is going to be a little bit higher. And the reason for that is these purchases are going to be sight unseen. You're not going to be able to complete inspections. You're not going to be able to have your contractors walk the property. You are bidding and potentially acquiring these properties without having been inside. So this is going to be more for either your sophisticated investors or for people that have a very high risk tolerance, but you can potentially grab very profitable deals if you know what you're looking for. So that would be another option. And then the multiple listing service. I promise you, you can find opportunities on the multiple listing service. And I know this to be true because I purchased my house flip off of the MLS. So what we're looking for is properties that have been on market for a while. We can search within the comments for needs TLC or rehab project or handyman special all these little keywords that the seller's agent is putting in to let them know this property is not for your everyday buyer. It's going to be more for the investor crowd, people that are looking to flip or to invest in the property. The MLS is still very much alive. Ideally, we want to target properties that have been on market for 60, 90 days plus. That could be another situation where the seller is now looking to kind of get it off their books. They might be willing to accept a price that's lower than maybe they initially had thought. So don't give up on the MLS, because I had success on it. Other investors are having success, and you can connect with a real estate agent to be getting new listing alerts. You can use your traditional realtor.coms, your Zillows.com, your Trulias, all these places to search advertised listings. But when we pair the four of these together, whether it's your networking events, your wholesalers / real estate agents, foreclosure auctions, if you decide that's an avenue you want to pursue, plus the MLS, these are four great channels that if you exploit all of them, you will be able to find opportunities for your first house flip. You've identified the property to acquire. Now the question is, where are we going to get the money to pay for it? How are we going to finance both the purchase of the property as well as the renovation? First stop is going to be, you're going to walk into your local bank, whether it's your Bank of America, your Trustco banks, JP Morgan, whatever it might be, and you're going to apply for a mortgage, right? That's not the case. That is not their business model. They are looking to lend on properties that are safe, habitable. We as investors, as house flippers, are targeting properties that may not have running water, or the heating source might not be functional, or there is something significantly wrong with this property that has put it into distress. Local banks or your traditional mortgage lenders, that is not their business model. They are looking to lend for 30 years or for a 15-year mortgage to a home for a home buyer that's going to live in the property. We're not living in the property. We're not holding it for 15 years. We're looking to get out 6 months to 9 months. Bad fit. They're not what we're looking for. We're not what they're looking for. Where are we going to find these lenders that can actually help us out for a distressed asset? I'm sending you back to the networking events, because any quality networking event is going to have hard money / private lenders. These are people that their specific business model is lending money to real estate investors. This is going to be short duration credit, could be anywhere from 6 months to 18 months, depending on the scope of the project. It's going to be at a higher price point. So if you're seeing the 30-year fixed rate mortgage at 6.5%, we're not borrowing at 6.5% when we're looking to flip properties. It's going to be significantly more expensive. But these are people that this is what they do for a living. It's private money. It's going to be, the attractive aspect is going to be the speed. They can lend very quickly. So if you've ever purchased a house before, it could take 45 to 60 days to close on that transaction. Once you get into the hard money / private money world, they're closing transactions in 2 weeks, sometimes even less. So they can move very, very quickly. The structure is in place where they've done so many house flips that it's a very streamlined process. So again, it's going to be very quick. What you are paying for is the high cost of money. So it's going to be anywhere from, could be 12 to 14% interest rates. And there's usually going to be some origination points. Points are going to be 1% of the principal that you're looking to borrow. Let's say we're looking to borrow $200,000. The fees alone could be, let's say it's 2% origination fees. You're going to be paying $4,000 in points, plus call it 12% interest rate for the duration that you're borrowing the money. So what you're getting is quick money. They specifically lend on distressed assets, but again, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. If we want to avoid that, what are the other options? At that point, we're turning to friends and family. So if this is really going to depend on how good of a story you can tell, because as a first-time investor, you don't have the track record to be able to go out to, let's call it strangers, and say, I'm looking to borrow money for a project. We're turning to friends and family and saying, I believe I can make this work. This is the property I'm looking to acquire. Now you need to explain to them why this is going to be successful. So you're going to show them the numbers that you've put together. You're going to be showing them recent sales in the neighborhood to say, once it's rehabbed, I expect it's going to be selling for this based on recent sales. Here's my rundown of expenses that I'm going to be looking to put into the property. You need to be able to articulate this to your circle as to why they shouldn't be investing in you. The benefits to this are going to be the cost. There's no fixed rate on what you can borrow from them. It's going to be whatever the two parties agree to, and there's going to be flexibility as far as timing. So if you went the private money, hard money route, they might have a hard, hey, this project needs to be completed in 12 months. Otherwise, we're coming after you. Friends and family, you might be able to negotiate something that's a little bit more open-ended for you to complete the project. And again, the cost is going to be less. The cons to something like this, and there are some, is going to be you are risking relationships. So if you borrowed $20,000 from Uncle Joe and the project ended up failing and you lost Uncle Joe all his money, that's going to be a very uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner when you sit down together, right? So there is that risk. And also there's going to be the reliability of the person that you're borrowing from. So you may have a very good friend that says, yeah, that project sounds really interesting. I'm willing to lend you $50,000 to go get it done. Fast forward 2 weeks when it comes time for you to close and they need to wire the money. Suddenly that friend has disappeared, or, hey, I wasn't really serious, or, now's not a good time. So there is that reliability concern where, again, if you're going the private hard money route, these people are very serious. If they say they're going to lend, typically they are. So you do run the risk of not all the money might suddenly dry up when you need it the most. And the last option is going to be bootstrap. And this is going to be you cobbling together all of the money for the project yourself. This could be your savings. This could be tapping into retirement accounts. This could be putting some of the expenses onto credit cards, doing whatever you can to just contain it all for yourself. And what I ended up doing would be kind of a combination of bootstraps / friends and family. Now, the benefits to bootstraps is going to be you are keeping more of the profits. You're not paying lenders interest. You're not paying them origination points. That stays all with you. And additionally, you are the boss. You are not answering to any of these lenders. You're not getting phone calls. When's the project going to be done? Your cousin isn't calling you, hey, I need to get repaid. I've got, college expenses coming up. That's all out the window because everything is on you. The downside to that is also everything is on you. So if you have mortgages and you have health insurance and you have all of your daily expenses, now we're piling in a house flip on top of that. What you will find is, and this is my personal experience, as you get farther down the road and you're sending more and more money out the door to your contractors for property taxes, for property insurance, it can start to feel like a pretty significant weight is on the back of your shoulders. And the more and more you spend, the heavier and heavier that gets. So I think if I were to go back in time, and this is going to be kind of one of the summary items as well, is what would I do differently? Because obviously, if you're someone new or you've only done a couple house flip, there's still a lot to learn. I will share with you kind of how I would go about do things differently. I would be borrowing more, whether it's hard money or private lenders, or relying more on my inner circle, friends and family to borrow from, versus trying to carry as much of the weight as I did. Because what I personally found was it was a lot, and it was really beating me up at the end. I was looking around like, how much more of this can I take, right? Because the projects run late, projects get expensive. So bootstrapping is great if you can afford to do it. Friends and family, if that is an option for you, very attractive. You can make them money. You can take off some of the burden yourself. And don't shy away from looking at private / hard money lenders, because this is what they do for a business. They are there to see you be successful. They want to make sure you're successful. So maybe it's a combination of the three. Maybe it's two. If you want to try to bootstrap the entire thing yourself, you certainly can. But these are all options, and they're all worthwhile exploring, that you can make house flipping work. And this is how you're going to do it. You have identified the property to acquire. You've lined up your financing for both the purchase and the renovation. Then it comes time to, how are we going to manage this renovation project? What is that going to look like from the owner standpoint? This is really going to be the meat and potatoes of today's video. When it comes to doing inspections, you may or may not, depending on how you're acquiring the property, be able to do inspections. If you are buying a property off the multiple listing service, or it could be from a wholesaler or someone you connected with at a networking event, more than likely you will have the opportunity to put language in your purchase that you are looking to do inspections. The exception to that is going to be if you are purchasing from an auction, tax foreclosure, or a bank foreclosure, more than likely you will not be able to complete inspections. That is a sight unseen purchase. But again, multiple listing service, wholesaler, someone from a networking event, you can do inspections. How are we going to be pricing this project out? What we are going to do is, the first time we're walking properties, we're going to be taking notes. We're going to be basically formulating our list. Okay, the property needs new flooring. It's going to need new cabinets. Potentially it might need a new roof. This is our initial walkthrough. And then once you get home, it's very simple. You go onto your Lowe's, your Home Depots, you're building out your cart because you want to price out, how much is this going to cost me? How am I going to determine how much I can put into this property and still make a profit? We can nail down materials. Now, what's going to be the unknown is going to be the contractor cost, the labor cost. That we can't solve for right away. But in terms of materials, you can 100% solve for that yourself. When it comes to actually having the offer accepted on the property, As long as you have language in there that you're going to be able to do inspections, now we're going to be able to dive a little bit deeper into the actual pricing. You have it under contract. At this point, you're bringing in your building inspector. You can bring in your contractor and have him start pricing out items. What we want to avoid is calling up your contractor that you maybe have built a relationship with and say, hey, I'm interested in buying 123 Main Street. Can you go take a look at it with me? You bring him out, or you bring out a property inspector and they do all their work. The very next day, the seller sells the building to someone else. Now you've not only wasted their time, but they've probably charged you for, a building inspection, whatever it might be. So now we're losing money on properties we never had the rights to purchase anyway, because we never had it under contract. So we don't want to be spending money until we actually have the rights to the property. Do as much due diligence on the front end as you possibly can. Could be something as simple as calling a local roofer that is reputable in the area and say, ballpark, 2-story, 1,500 square foot property. What are you charging for a asphalt shingle roof? Something to that effect. And you should be able to get, you won't get specifics, but you might be able to get ballpark pricing on the type of roof that you're looking to replace. Once you get it under contract, then we're getting a little bit more serious. Then we're paying for building inspections. Then we're having your contractor come in. We're not wasting our money and we're not wasting people's times. So that's the ideal way to go about doing that. Where are we going to find these contractors? As someone that's new, this is going to be probably the hardest part of your job. There's going to be a lot of people that want to lend you money. There's going to be a lot of people that want to sell you properties. Finding quality contractors that do decent work is going to be, if not the hardest, one of the hardest parts of the renovation and the house flipping process. I am sending you back to networking events because you might find your contractors there, or more than likely you'll find a lot of people that do house flipping. And as long as you come with a specific need, you should be able to get help. What we want to avoid is walking into a networking event and saying, I'm a first-time house flipper. I need a roofer. I need an electrician. I need a plumber. A very general scope of a request. You may not have success. However, if you were to walk into a networking event and say, I am working on a project in Schenectady. I need an electrician that does residential work. You're going to get a lot of people that are reaching out to help you because that's very specific and probably something will go off in their mind. Oh yeah, I used, Joe Smith, the electrician, a few months ago. I'll match him up with Steve. So be as specific as you possibly can. Where else are you going to find these people? Google and social media is a great avenue to find contractors. And the reason I say that is because not only can you see Google reviews, which will tell a great story, a lot of the decent contractors are going to be posting on social media, not only talking about their projects that they're working on, but it's the pictures. And why we want to see pictures is because when we're hiring contractors, we want to make sure it's a good fit for the project we're looking to take on. What do I mean by that? I don't want to hire someone that does great kitchen renovations on a 3,000 square foot house on Lake George if I'm looking to purchase a bank foreclosure in Schenectady that's, a 1/10 of the price, right? That's misaligning. That's very similar to if we tried to go into Bank of America to get financing on a distressed property. It's a bad fit. They're not looking to lend on the properties that we have. We're looking for different types of debt. It's no different than contractors. Each contractor is going to specialize in different areas, different price points. So we want to make sure when we're looking at pictures, does this more or less align with location-wise and scope of project with what we're looking to get done? So social media is going to be a great avenue to do it. Tips on someone that's managed, obviously not just a house flip, but as someone that's owned multifamily properties for 15 years. A great rule of thumb is going to be if a project costs over $10,000, we're getting 2 quotes. If it's over $15,000, we're getting 3 quotes. And there's a couple of reasons we're doing that. If a contractor believes you to be a rookie, someone inexperienced, you may find folks that are looking to take advantage of you. It's just the truth. Whether they're just looking to straight out steal from you, or if they're thinking, the project would really cost 10 for most people, but I bet I could get 12 out of them, right? So when we're acquiring multiple quotes, we're cutting down on that. And there's no harm in letting your other contractors know that, hey, I'm just, I got 2 people looking at this. Basically, you don't want to let on that you have, 10 contractors bidding on one project, because that's a huge waste of time on your part. But also, contractors aren't going to take you seriously if they think they have, 10 other people to beat out. So there's no harm in saying, yep, I got one other guy looking at this project and I'll get back to you, this weekend on a decision. That's very healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're the contractor, I don't think you would get insulted, but that's a good avenue to do that. When it comes time to payment, so you're going to get the quote for the project. The other thing you want to ask for is, how do you like to get paid for the work? And the answer should not be, I need 100% of the quote up front. And what you'll find is that would be pretty extreme. But what you might run into is, I need half of it up front and half of it once we get halfway done, something like that. What you want to prevent is someone stealing from you, A, first and foremost, but B, the more you front load the payment, the less of an incentive they have to come back and complete it. So there should be a little bit healthy of a conversation in terms of, okay, what if we paid for, some of the materials up front? Could I do 25% up front, another 25 once you get halfway done, and the remaining 50? That's a conversation that you need to get comfortable having with these folks, because again, not that they're up to anything nefarious, but if they think that this person might be new, they also might think they might not have the money to pay for the project. And that's not going to be aligned with their business, right? So it's a healthy conversation. You don't want to be paying everything up front. You want to pay as little up front as possible, but at the same time, understand where the contractor is coming from. They want to make sure that they get paid for the work that they're completing. So that's a conversation for you to have. When it comes time to how are we dealing with contractors, what you need to understand is there are a lot more of you than there are of them. And what I mean by that is, there are a lot of investors, there are a lot of house flippers, there are a lot of people that just are looking to have renovations done to their house that they live in. What you're asking for is not rare. However, what is rare is quality contractors that you can trust, that are going to charge you a decent rate and that are going to complete the project on time. There are not many of them. So if they are one of those, they are very much in demand, which means we need to treat these people with respect. And a lot of that is paying people on time. So what you don't want to do is payment is due on the 1st and it's, the 10th of the month and you still haven't mailed out your check, or you're dodging phone calls, whatever it might be. Go out of your way to make it easier for them to say yes to not only doing this project, but project 2, project 3, assuming this house flip goes well for you. Because again, they have a lot of options. You do not. So you want to make sure that when they're thinking of, God, I got this, this calendar is filling up. Whose project am I going to take on? Oh yeah, Steve took care of me last time. I didn't have to chase down for payment. He was easy to communicate with. Make it as easy for them to say yes to future projects as you possibly can. Written agreements is going to be very important, but it's also going to be tricky because a lot of these contractors are going to be kind of your mom and pop business operations. They're not doing DocuSign contracts or, these formal written agreements. A lot of it you might find is just verbal phone conversations in person. What we want to avoid is we don't necessarily need the DocuSigns and the big beefy written agreements. What we want to avoid is just verbal and handshake agreements, because you need to protect yourself. And also you want to have something to fall back on just in case you get to a situation where you walk into the property and suddenly the bathroom is blue. You thought the bathroom was going to be green. If you have it written down, you can point to, nope, this is what we discussed. And that could be a simple mistake, right? But also in an extreme example, you may find yourself in a situation where you need to fire people. And this is something I ran into on multiple occasions on just this one project. I needed to fire people, but you better believe before I did so, I went back through all of our text messages, all of the emails, to make sure there was nothing in there that says, if person completes, half of the project and, they get fired, they get full payment, where something egregious like that, where I would be on the hook for more money than the work that was actually completed. So emails, text messages at an absolute minimum. And if you can get more from that, that's healthy for everybody. Instead of giving you broad strokes on what a renovation might look like, I figured why not just pull up my ChatGPT history? We can see what the project actually cost. And this is literally like almost a year's worth of work that went into this. But we see that we purchased the property for $70,000. Property taxes we paid while holding the property were right around $3,000. This was a oil heated property, so we had a shade under $3,000 worth of heating expenses. Property insurance for the 8 or so months that we held the property was $2,500. That might be a little bit more expensive than what you would see on the property that maybe you live in yourself. What you'll find is that because no one lives in this house, this is strictly an investment. It's a renovation project. There's more risk for the insurer. So it's going to be more expensive than kind of, if you have a condo or a single family house, whatever that might be. So in addition, we paid $11,000 worth of interest to folks that we borrowed money from to purchase and renovate the property. So the acquisition / carrying costs came in right around $90,000. We did need to put a new roof. This was a 1,500 square foot, 2-story property. We did repaired some of the metal aspect to it, but about half of the property was asphalt shingled. That needed to be redone. The heating system, we did put in a brand new furnace. The house did need complete plumbing. There was no running water at the time that we purchased the property. We did have a new panel put on for electrical, and a brand new well did need to put in. This was over 300 feet down, so it was a very deep well that was put in. The previous one was hand dug, maybe 25 to 50 feet, completely dried up. So saving that was not an option. So we did need to put in a new well. And the water that was coming out was pretty murky. So we did put in a filtration system on top of that. The tank itself was in solid shape. So we were able to get away with reusing that. The leach field did need to be completely redone. There was no leach field. It was literally pumping out into just a bed of rocks. So we did actually put in a legitimate leach field that was designed by an engineer, which you will need to have done and approved by the town where the property is located. Chimney needed to be rebuilt. So major systems came in right around $60,000. General contractor for doing all of the interior work, so your bathrooms, your kitchens. We put in a new sliding glass door and painting, the whole kit and caboodle, funded right around $60,000. We did hire, you could go for independent companies. I like to keep my business local. However, for carpeting, it was so much easier just to go to Lowe's. So Lowe's did carpeting for the staircase as well as 3 bedrooms. The exterior stonework, there was no paved driveway, so instead we put down some gravel. And if we have time to get to pictures later, there is a bit of a entertaining area outside in the backyard, like a fire pit type situation. So we did put in some rocks and stones. The garage needed a little bit of touching up. The shed was damaged after we had accepted an offer to sell the property. We had a storm come through, damaged the shed, so I needed to get that cleaned up. So additional improvements for an additional $65,000. And then there was site work. There was probably 2 years of no one living in the property meant that it would become quite overgrown. And this was over 3 acres in size. That's a pretty substantial yard that needs to be cleaned up. So during that process, we also identified that at one point there was an in-ground pool on the property that needed to be filled in, because we don't want to get people to get injured, but also for financing purposes, you can't have a large exposed area like that. So we weren't able to save it. It was completely in distress. So we filled it in according to standards by the town. So don't just go YOLO and do whatever you want. You do need to approve this with the town. On the tax rolls, it does show that there's a pool at the property. So we need to get that buttoned up and say, hey, town, this is the way you told me to close up the pool. Here's the proof. Get this off the tax records. Did it the right way. Dumpster, we had a number of dumpsters to haul away all the nonsense for a few grand. I did have the house washed, and obviously we want to make sure we get the best possible photography. We're doing all of this work to bring the property back to life. We're not taking pictures on our cell phone to put on the multiple listing service. So we want to make sure we're getting legitimate photography. So factor in an additional $10,000. When you sell the property, you are going to have additional costs with that. So I had to pay the buyer's agent. So the person buying the property from me, I paid them a percentage of the purchase price. I am a real estate agent, so I was able to cut down on costs because I did not have to pay a seller's agent. And part of my sales pitch to when I purchased the property from what was the bank owned the property, I was able to say to them, there is no I'm not charging a commission. I'm not asking you to pay me anything as the buyer's agent, because I am the buyer's agent, but I'm also the buyer. Don't pay me on that. So I was able to shave some expenses off on the front end as well as the back end. You're going to have legal, you're going to have closing costs with your attorney on the back end and the front end. Also, you're going to have some title work on the front end. So selling costs were, call it $11,500, which meant we were into the project for a shade under $240,000. And we ended up selling the property for $320,000 after a 6-month rehab and 2 months of closing period. So now we're coming down the final stretch. You have identified the property to acquire. You've lined up the appropriate type of financing to not only purchase, but renovate it. You've successfully managed the renovation project with your contractors and your entire team. Now let's talk about how we're going to sell this for not only the best exit, but also how are we going to maximize all this money, because we spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of money on putting this project together. Now we need to talk about how we're going to maximize that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we are interviewing multiple real estate agents. When we talked about contractors, any project that was $15,000 and above, we're interviewing 3 contractors. We're getting 3 separate quotes. A good real estate agent and a mediocre real estate agent, the difference can be thousands and thousands of dollars. So we are interviewing multiple real estate agents. We're not necessarily focused on who has the best social media presence or the most wonderful smile. It's who can articulate to you, this is why we're going to sell it at this price. This is how we're going to separate ourselves from the competition. And realistically, you should anticipate selling the property in X amount of months. They need to bullet point that for you. We are reviewing sales together. So you are asking them, I want to see all of sales within the 3-mile radius over the past 12 months. Why is that the criteria? When someone comes to buy our property, more than likely they're going to be using bank financing. And with bank financing, they are going to have an appraisal done. And when the appraiser comes out to the property, in order to determine what your house is worth, they are going to be looking at properties within a 3-mile radius that have sold within the past 12 months. If you happen to live in a more rural area where there aren't a lot of sales, that radius can be expanded to, call it 5 to 6 miles. However, realistically, if there are sales in your area within 12 months that are closer to home, that's where they're going to look. So I want the real estate agent to send me every single sale that's a single family house, 12 months, within the past 12 months, within 3 miles. I want to see those sales. And then I want them to tell me, this is what you should be selling the house for. And then let's have a conversation. Because if I'm thinking the house is worth $350,000 and you're telling me we should sell it for $325,000, okay, we're close, but like, help me get there. Help me figure out how you came up with that price. And it could be, well, if we're looking for a quick sale, maybe it's $325,000. That might be what you're looking for. You might want the quick sale. Maybe you're not interested in absolute top dollar. If you have, a bunch of expenses, you need to get this property off your plate. Or you might say, all the work's been done. I'm not stressed about money. I want to go after top dollar. That's a healthy conversation to have with your agent. What they also might be able to do is recommend any last minute improvements to the property. I'm not looking for them to tell me, hey, why don't you go redo that second floor bathroom? That's not the point of this conversation. What I'm looking for is, hey, is there any work on the exterior? Like, should we be putting in some plants or any, backyard cleanup or just anything small that they think, in their experience, they're seeing help properties sell more quickly, make it more attractive, and it's not a massive lift on your part to be able to do it. 6 months from start to finish on the renovation, then factor in roughly an additional 2 to get the property sold. Let's talk about lessons learned, things I would potentially do differently for the next project. Well, some will be kind of macro level, some will be kind of very specific to the property itself, but lenders are not the enemy. When I went into this, one of my goals was I want to be able to do as much of this myself in terms of the finances. I don't want to have to pay those high interest rates we talked about for the private lenders. I don't want to be paying those fees. I want to save that money for myself. That's a very limiting mindset. What I really should be looking at is these lenders are here as a tool. I should be using the tool. Yes, I'm going to pay a little bit for that tool, but also I'm going to get a whole bunch of experience. I'm going to get some guidance from them. And I'm also going to be taking a lot of the burden off of myself. So lenders are not necessarily your friend. I would view them more as your business partner, someone that wants you to succeed. At the end of the day, lenders don't want to be taking back properties from people. That's not a good look, and it's also not a great business. So they're there for you, but they are not your enemy. So use lenders within reason. Next is going to be kind of specific to the property. Staging and / whiteout we'll put together. It was recommended to me by some folks that are more experienced in staging and more experienced in house flipping that it would be worth it to have the property staged. If you're not familiar, staging is basically someone comes in with furniture and paintings, and it makes it look like when people are touring the property, it makes it look like it's actually a lived-in house. You get a better feel for what you would look like if you lived in the property versus what I was presenting to them was basically just a blank slate. And it's a little bit tricky to visualize yourself and your family if you can't see how someone else might have been living in the property. So I would more than likely have the property staged, whether that means actually staged or what we're seeing a lot of on online pictures is virtual staging. So a lot of these platforms will allow you to transpose furniture and things like that into your listing photos. Now, you don't get that when they actually show up to the property, right? But at least you're getting more people in the door, ideally, without necessarily the cost of doing a full stage. So I would explore one of those two. In terms of the actual renovation itself, There was a lot of wood paneling throughout the entire property. And again, this is a very specific to the property problem, but there was a ton of wood. And the question I was trying to get my hand around is, wood is very old fashioned, but it's also very rural, which this type of property, this exact property was. How much of that old feel do I want to keep versus kind of the whites and the light grays that you're seeing in a lot of new construction these days? What's the blend? And ultimately, I kind of ended up in an awkward half, half of one, half the other, where the kitchen was completely gutted. Everything looked brand new. But then once you were kind of walk through to the bedrooms and the living room area, there's still a lot of the wood. So if I were to go back in time, I would probably white out everything. And what I say by white out is I would be painting everything. So keep the hardwood floors as is. We're not touching those. All of the walls would be white or some kind of an off-white. And that way it just feels a little bit more modern. Unfortunately, I ended up in kind of an awkward middle stage. And lastly, scared money don't make money. You don't want to try to half heart or half spend on these projects. You want to go, if there's something you can do to maximize profits, you want to go after that. And what I'm thinking specifically is there is a large garage with a loft area within this property. It would have been money well spent for me to reside the property or reside the structure. When you pull up to the property, it is the very first thing that you see. It is very large, and it was also missing a bunch of siding. There was a hole in part of it. It's going to scare some people away. It's going to limit the type of financing you're going to be able to get, because if you're coming in with a buyer who is FHA or VA, those guidelines in terms of what the property, how it needs to present itself, peeling paint, things like that, suddenly disqualifies possibly half of your buyer pool. So if I could go back in time, I would have spent money on getting that done, because I think it would have made the property sell more quickly. I think I certainly would have gotten a higher price point. We'll go ahead and wrap up with this. I thought it would be fun to put together a list of the winners and the losers of when you take on a project like this. Obviously, the money is nice, right? So the first and foremost, the winner would be myself. We talked about what we purchased the property for, the holding costs, the renovation itself, and then the exit. So there was a nice gap there. That's nice. What I would like to stress to you is that the amount that you'll be learning about not only yourself, but about the real estate business during this process, I would say is more valuable than anything you could possibly earn on a single house flip. You'll be pushed to your limits, you'll be stressed, and ultimately, once you persevere and you get to the exit, you're going to be extremely proud of yourself, and you should be, because providing safe quality housing to your community is a noble effort, and being able to monetize that is even better, right? So don't be afraid to go after it. You might be stressed, you might be pushed to your limits. I promise you, it is worth it. You just got to see it through to the end. Contractors. I had no less than a dozen different contractors involved in this project, whether it was plumbers or roofers or masons or well drillers or septic guys, right? All of these people had to come together. And what do they all have in common? They all got paid, right? So in some form or fashion, they're not direct employees of yours, but in some part, they're able to feed their families and continue to do what they love to do because of what you were able to accomplish. So you're winning. All of these contractors are winning. When you're buying and selling property, especially in New York State, you are going to have attorneys. There are going to be attorneys involved in the project. The bank has an attorney if there's a mortgage, or you have your attorney, the opposite side is going to have an attorney. These people are all getting fed, right? They're all getting their little piece. Inspectors, if you're hiring property inspectors, they're getting paid. The bank. So in this case, I purchased the property. The seller was a bank. It was a foreclosure. The bank had taken back the property. The bank is now able to get this property off of their balance sheet, use that money to go lend out to other people that are looking to start businesses or buy properties, whatever it might be. So the bank was certainly a lender. They had a bad asset on their books. They were able to get it off. Title insurance, when you're purchasing property, you're going to have insurance that's going to protect you in case there's some mysterious lien that pops up from 10 years ago. Guess what? They're getting paid. Property insurance, I certainly, the last thing you want to do is you're halfway through a renovation and suddenly your house burns down and you're not insured. So there was property insurance. That's more people getting paid. The town, and this is one of the ones you probably want to focus on more than anything else. With the new sales price, the town at some point is more than likely going to reassess the property at a higher amount. So that's going to be more tax revenue for paving roads, for keep the lights on at the schools and so forth. So your community is being improved because that's more tax dollars coming in. The buyer, because the purchaser of your property can now call themselves a homeowner, whether it's a family or some new person getting started in their career, whoever it is, they are now a homeowner strictly due to the efforts that you took on. So you should be very proud of that. You are, in one small aspect, contributing to the housing stock of your community. Home improvement stores, your Aces, your Lowe's, your Home Depots, I was there all the time buying, small stuff or cabinets or whatever it might be. So they certainly got their cut. And last but not least, Uncle Sam is going to come calling at tax time for house flips. This is not long-term capital gains. This is active income. So we are going to be paying a pretty high tax liability come next year. But these are all the winners. And then we look at who loses in a situation like this. I couldn't think of a single one. I don't see any losers in this. I just see a whole bunch of winning. I see people doing well, people getting paid, people learning, towns improving. I don't see anyone that comes out on the short end of the stick here. So if you are someone that is on the fence about, is it worth it? Is this something I should jump into? The opportunity is there to improve your financial situation, improve the quality of things you'll be learning, the character of the person you'll be developing, and at the same time, improving your community. I don't see any losers. So that's something you could focus on. If you've made it this far in the video, consider becoming a subscriber or just give a like and comment. I'd like to hear kind of your feedback, whether there's something in the video that maybe you thought was wrong. If you're an experienced house flipper, again, I've owned rentals for quite a long time, but this is the first property I took on as strictly a flip. So if you're someone that is more experienced and you say, Steve, I think you got this part wrong, I would love to hear from you. Other people that have watched this video would love to hear from you. And if you are someone in the capital region that has a real estate related need, whether you're looking to do investing or buying or selling, Steven@sjlincoln.com is my email address, or visit sjlincoln.com/book a call. That is my website, Steven@sjlincoln.com, sjlincoln.com/book a call. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.